You want to know how I ended up driving a 40-ton bulldozer through a $6 million mansion my husband bought for his pregnant mistress? Simple. I'm not the kind of woman you screw over. My name is Frankie O'Donnell, and I've been running heavy machinery since before I could legally drink. I built my construction company out of nothing but sweat, a loan from a guy who believed in me, and a stubborn refusal to let any man tell me what I couldn't do. So when I found out that my husband, Jack Harrington, the polished, silver-tongued heir to the Harrington real estate empire, had been lying to me for months, I didn't cry into a pillow. I didn't call a lawyer first. I called my foreman and told him to warm up the D11. It started with a tablet. One of those stupid family iPads that nobody uses except to look up recipes or stream shows in the kitchen. Jack had synced it to his phone years ago, back when we still pretended we were a normal couple. He forgot about it. Men always forget about the little things. That evening, I was standing at the kitchen island, trying to decide if leftover meatloaf was worth the effort, when the screen lit up with a notification. It was a text from someone named Amber. Not his secretary. Not his mother. Amber. Dr. Reynolds says the baby is perfectly healthy, Jack. Another boy. He's going to look just like you. The baby. Another boy. Just like you. I read those words maybe 30 times before my brain caught up with my eyes. My chest got tight, but I didn't scream. I didn't throw the tablet across the room, even though I wanted to. Instead, I did what any self-respecting woman with my particular skill set would do. I started digging. More messages rolled in. Amber, it turned out, was very chatty. She sent ultrasound photos, thank yous for the adorable nursery furniture, and a long, gushing paragraph about the beautiful house Jack had just bought for her. A house in the gated community of Sterling Hills, the kind of place where the lawns are greener than money and the HOA fines you if your mailbox is the wrong shade of beige. She even sent a photo of herself holding the keys, beaming like she'd won the lottery. She was young, blonde, and very, very pregnant. The house was a 6-bedroom, 7-bathroom monstrosity with a 3-car garage and a fountain in the front yard. $6.2 million. I knew the price because Jack's assistant, a weaselly little man named Greg, had sent a confirmation message about the wire transfer. Full payment. Cash. Jack Harrington, my husband of 8 years, had just bought his mistress a mansion with cash. The same Jack who, just last week, had sat across from me at this very kitchen island and told me that money was tight. He'd asked me to delay expanding my business, my company, O'Donnell Construction, the one I'd built from the ground up, because we need to consolidate our finances, babe. Just for a little while. He'd even had the audacity to look sad about it. I remember staring at that photo of Amber holding the keys, and something inside me just snapped. Not in a hysterical, crying, falling apart kind of way. In a calm, quiet, crystal clear way. The way a lake looks right before a storm hits. I walked to the garage, pulled on my steel-toed boots, and grabbed my truck keys. My foreman, Big Mike, answered on the second ring. Frankie? It's 10 o'clock at night. Mike, is the D11 at the yard or on a site? It's at the yard. Why? What's going on? I need it at 8 tomorrow morning. Sterling Hills, number 12 Magnolia Lane. Have it delivered and running. I'll drive it from there. There was a long pause. Frankie, that's a residential neighborhood. The HOA there once sued a guy for planting the wrong flowers. You can't just roll up with a bulldozer. Watch me. What are you planning? I'm planning on doing a little home renovation. Mike knows me well enough not to argue when I use that voice. He just said, I'll have it there at 7:30. And Frankie? Whatever that house did to you, I hope it had it coming. It did, Mike. It really did. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my home office, scrolling through 8 years of memories that suddenly felt like lies. Our wedding photo on my desk, Jack in a tuxedo, me in a simple white dress I'd bought off the rack because I refused to spend a fortune on something I'd wear once. He'd told me I looked beautiful. He'd told me he was the luckiest man in the world. Was any of it real? I didn't know anymore. Around 3 in the morning, I did something I'm not proud of. I made a list. Not of pros and cons, but of all the things I'd sacrificed for this marriage. The business contracts I'd turned down because they'd require too much travel. The friendships I'd let fade because Jack's social circle was all charity galas and golf tournaments. The piece of myself I'd quietly tucked away so I could be Mrs. Jack Harrington, the supportive wife, the woman who smiled at cocktail parties and pretended she didn't notice the way other women looked at her husband. By dawn, the list was 3 pages long. I folded it up, tucked it into my back pocket, and headed for Sterling Hills. The D11 was waiting for me when I arrived, a massive yellow beast sitting in the pristine cul-de-sac like a dinosaur that had wandered into a tea party. A couple of neighbors were already outside, clutching their coffee mugs and staring. One woman in yoga pants had her phone out, probably recording. Good. Let them record. Big Mike had left the engine running. I climbed up into the cab, put on my hard hat, and adjusted the seat. It felt like coming home. I'd spent years operating machines like this, back before I owned the company, back when I was just a girl from a trailer park who talked her way onto a construction crew by outworking every man on the site. The smell of diesel and hydraulic fluid brought back memories of a time when everything was simpler. When the only thing that mattered was whether you could move enough dirt before the sun went down. I gripped the joysticks and took a deep breath. The house in front of me was genuinely beautiful, I'll give it that. Stone facade, arched windows, a double front door with wrought iron details. The kind of house a man buys for the woman he loves. The kind of house Jack had never even offered to buy for me. Not that I wanted it. I'd always been happier in our slightly run-down ranch house with the creaky porch and the kitchen I'd remodeled myself. But it wasn't about the house. It was about the lie. I pushed the throttle forward. The bulldozer lurched, and the giant steel blade at the front rose up. I aimed for the middle of that beautiful stone facade. The first impact was louder than I expected, a deep, grinding crunch of stone and wood and glass all surrendering at once. The front door splintered like a toothpick. The arched windows shattered, raining glass down onto the manicured lawn. The wrought iron details twisted and snapped. It was, I have to admit, incredibly satisfying. I backed up and hit it again. This time, the whole front wall buckled. Dust and debris filled the air. I could hear someone screaming, maybe the yoga pants lady, maybe someone else. I didn't care. I was focused. I worked the controls with the same precision I'd use on any demolition job, methodically taking the house apart piece by piece. The east wing, the one with the nursery, judging by the pale blue curtains I could see through a collapsing window, went down with a roar. The garage collapsed, crushing the brand new minivan inside that was probably meant for school runs and soccer practice. I thought about Jack asking me to delay my business expansion. I thought about the 3 pages of sacrifices in my back pocket. I thought about every time he'd kissed me goodbye and said he loved me, knowing he was driving straight to her. The master bedroom was on the 2nd floor, with a balcony that overlooked a rose garden. I took out the balcony first, then the wall behind it. The bed, their bed, I assumed, tumbled out and crashed onto the pile of rubble below. I made sure to give it an extra nudge with the blade, just for good measure. By the time I was done, the mansion looked like a giant had stomped on it. What had once been a $6.2 million dream home was now a pile of broken stone, twisted metal, and splintered wood. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the silence that followed. Even the neighbors had stopped screaming. The only sound was the faint hiss of a broken water pipe and the ticking of cooling metal. I climbed down from the cab. My hands were steady, my heart was calm. I took off my hard hat and shook out my ponytail. That's when I saw Jack's black Mercedes screech to a halt at the end of the cul-de-sac. He jumped out of the car, still in his suit from whatever meeting he'd been at. His tie was crooked, his hair was a mess, and his face was the color of old milk. He stared at the pile of rubble, then at me, then back at the rubble. His mouth opened and closed a few times, like a fish gasping for air. "Frankie," he finally managed, his voice cracking. "What have you done?" I walked toward him, stepping over a piece of what used to be the front door. "You said you wanted to consolidate our finances. So I consolidated. Saved us a fortune in property taxes. This is insane. You've lost your mind." "Oh, I've lost my mind?" I pulled the list from my back pocket and waved it in his face. "You told me we couldn't afford to grow my business. You told me money was tight. Meanwhile, you're buying mansions for your pregnant girlfriend. You don't get to call me insane, Jack. You get to call a real estate agent and explain why your mistress's house is now a parking lot." His eyes darted around, taking in the neighbors, the phones, the absolute chaos. Then he did something unexpected. His shoulders sagged. The anger drained out of his face, replaced by something that looked almost like despair. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "This isn't what you think." "Really?" "Because it looks exactly like what I think. You cheated, you lied, and you got caught." "I never cheated on you." I laughed. It was a harsh, brittle sound. "So Amber is what, your long-lost cousin? The baby isn't yours? You just bought her a house out of the goodness of your heart?" Jack opened his mouth, closed it, then looked at the crowd of neighbors. "We can't talk here. Please, Frankie. Just come home. Let me explain." "Home?" I pulled off my wedding ring, a simple gold band that I'd polished every Sunday because I was that kind of wife. I threw it at his feet. It bounced off the pavement and rolled into a crack in the sidewalk. "We don't have a home anymore. We have a crime scene." I turned and walked toward my truck. Behind me, I could hear Jack calling my name, but I didn't look back. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and peeled out of that perfect little cul-de-sac with my middle finger held high out the window. It wasn't classy, but it felt right. I drove to a diner on the edge of town, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and waitresses who call you hon. I ordered black coffee and a slice of apple pie, because even on the worst day of your life, you still need to eat. My phone was blowing up with calls and texts. Jack. My mother. Jack's father, Richard Harrington, who was probably already lawyering up to sue me for destruction of property. I ignored them all. I was halfway through my pie when a woman slid into the booth across from me. I looked up and nearly choked. It was Amber. The pregnant mistress herself, in the flesh, looking nothing like her glossy photos. In person, she was pale and tired, with dark circles under her eyes and chapped lips. She was wearing a stretched-out sweater and clutching a cup of herbal tea like it was a lifeline. "Mrs. O'Donnell?" Her voice was small, almost a whisper. I set down my fork. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here." "I know. I'm sorry." She wrapped her hands around her teacup, and I noticed they were shaking. "I saw what you did. It's all over the local news. And I think it's time someone told you the truth." "The truth?" "The truth is that you're carrying my husband's baby and living in a house he bought you." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "That's what you were supposed to think. That's what everyone was supposed to think. But it's not true. Jack is not the father of my baby." I stared at her. "Then who is?" Amber looked down at her belly, then back up at me. Her eyes were wet. "His father. Richard Harrington." The diner suddenly felt very quiet. The coffee in my cup stopped steaming. I must have misheard her. "Come again?" "Richard Harrington is the father of my child," she repeated, her voice barely audible. "He's been controlling me for over a year. He set this whole thing up. The affair, the house, the pregnancy, it was all part of his plan to destroy you and control Jack." My brain was struggling to process this. Richard Harrington was 72 years old, a silver-haired titan of the real estate world who treated people like chess pieces. He'd always been cold to me, but I'd assumed it was just because I wasn't born into money. This was something else entirely. Why? I managed to ask. Why would he do that? Because you're a threat to him. Your business, your independence, the way Jack looks at you, it all terrifies him. He wanted you out of the picture. And he wanted Jack completely under his thumb, with no one left to turn to. Amber wiped her eyes with a napkin. Jack found out months ago. But he couldn't just expose his father, Richard has too much power. So Jack started gathering evidence. Financial records, witness statements, everything he needed to take Richard down legally. But he knew that while he was doing that, Richard would come after you. So Jack, he made a choice. What kind of choice? He decided to make you hate him. He thought if you were angry enough, heartbroken enough, you'd leave him. File for divorce. Get out of Richard's reach. He pushed you away on purpose, Mrs. O'Donnell. He's been protecting you this whole time. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. All those late nights he said he was working. The distant, distracted way he'd been acting for months. The pained look in his eyes every time I tried to get close. I'd thought he was falling out of love with me. But he'd been building a wall, brick by brick, to keep me safe from a monster. Where is Jack now? I asked, my voice coming out hoarse. Amber's face tightened with fear. That's why I came to find you. Richard found out that Jack has been collecting evidence. He knows Jack is planning to hand it over to the authorities tonight. Richard's men have already picked Jack up. I don't know where they took him, but I heard Richard on the phone. He said something about the old warehouse district and making sure Jack doesn't talk. I was already on my feet, throwing a $20 bill on the table. Which warehouse district? There are 3 in this city. I don't know. But Jack left something for you at your office. He said if anything ever happened to him, you should look in the bottom drawer of your desk. I didn't wait to hear more. I ran out of the diner, jumped into my truck, and floored it toward O'Donnell Construction. The streets blurred past me. My mind was racing, trying to piece together everything Amber had said. Jack wasn't a cheater. He was a martyr. He'd let me believe the worst about him, let me destroy a $6 million house, let me throw my wedding ring in his face, all to keep me safe from his father. I screeched into the parking lot of my office and burst through the front door. My assistant, Lucy, looked up in alarm. Frankie! What's going on? The news is saying you. Not now, Lucy. I ran to my office and yanked open the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a thick manila envelope with my name on it, written in Jack's handwriting. I tore it open and found 2 things. The first was a letter, written in Jack's neat, slightly slanted script. Frankie, if you're reading this, something has gone very wrong. I need you to know that I have loved you since the moment I saw you at that construction site, covered in mud and yelling at a foreman twice your size. You are the most incredible person I have ever met, and everything I've done, every lie, every distance, has been to protect you. Enclosed is a flash drive with enough evidence to put my father away for the rest of his life. I was supposed to deliver it tonight, but if I'm not able to, you need to get it to FBI agent Sarah Chin. Her number is on the back of this letter. And Frankie? I'm sorry. For everything. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted you to be safe. All my love, Jack. Tears were streaming down my face by the time I finished reading. I wiped them away angrily and grabbed the flash drive. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the back of the letter. Agent Chen answered on the first ring. This is Chen. Agent Chen, my name is Frankie O'Donnell. My husband, Jack Harrington, has evidence of his father's crimes, and I believe he's been taken. I need your help. There was a pause. Mrs. O'Donnell, where are you right now? My office. O'Donnell Construction, off Route 12. Stay there. I'm sending agents to your location. Do not try to find your husband on your own. With all due respect, Agent Chen, I'm not really the stay put type. I hung up before she could argue. I knew exactly where Jack was. There was only one old warehouse district that Richard Harrington owned through a shell company. I'd seen the paperwork once, months ago, when I was helping Jack organize some files. He'd said it was nothing, just old family holdings. Now I knew better. I went to my equipment shed and grabbed the keys to a Caterpillar skid steer loader. It wasn't as big as the D11, but it was faster and more maneuverable. If Richard Harrington wanted to play dirty, he'd picked the wrong woman to mess with. I was Frankie O'Donnell. I'd built an empire with my own 2 hands and a whole lot of heavy machinery. And I was going to get my husband back, even if I had to tear down every wall in this city to do it. As I fired up the skid steer and pointed it toward the warehouse district, my phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. O'Donnell, if you come for your husband, he dies. This is your only warning. I looked at the message, then at the flash drive in my pocket, then at the road ahead. A grin spread across my face, the kind of grin that would make most sensible people very, very nervous. Bring it on, I muttered, and pushed the throttle forward. The real fight was just beginning. I punched the throttle on that Caterpillar skid steer and sent it roaring down the highway. The thing wasn't built for long hauls, topped out at maybe 12 miles an hour, but right then, it was my war chariot. I had a flatbed trailer hitched to the back with a compact excavator strapped down on it. Just in case. I've always been a woman who likes to have a backup plan. My phone rang again. This time it was my mother. Frankie O'Donnell. My mother only uses my full name when she's good and furious. The news is saying you bulldozed a house. Have you lost your mind? Ma, I can't talk right now. I'm going to save Jack. Save Jack? The cheating bastard? I thought you were going to kill him. He didn't cheat, Ma. It was his father's setup. The baby belongs to Richard Harrington. There was a solid 5 seconds of silence on the line. Then my mother spoke in a tone I'd barely ever heard from her. That old son of a bitch. I know. And I'm going to get his son away from him. By yourself? I've got a skid steer. Another pause. Then my mother let out a sigh that carried the weight of a woman who'd seen too much. You're just like your father. He once drove a tractor through the county sheriff's fence to come get me. Fine. I won't stop you. But Frankie, you promise me you're coming back alive. I promise. And give that old bastard hell for me. I couldn't help but grin. Yes, ma'am. I hung up and kept barreling toward the warehouse district. Night had fallen hard, and the street lights out here in the industrial zone were sparse, scattered around like loose change someone forgot to pick up. I killed my headlights and navigated by memory and the faint glow of the city on the horizon. Richard Harrington owned a cluster of abandoned warehouses on the west side of town. He'd bought them 20 years ago, planning to turn them into some kind of mixed-use development, but the project fell through and they'd been sitting empty ever since. I knew about them because Jack had brought me out here once, 2 years ago. He'd said he wanted to redevelop the land for affordable housing, give low-income families a shot at something decent. I'd thought he was dreaming. No way his father would ever allow it. Looking back now, maybe he was already planning something else entirely. The warehouse complex had 4 buildings arranged in a square around a central loading yard. I pulled the skid steer to a stop behind an abandoned gas station about 500 yards out and killed the engine. Then I texted Agent Chen my location. I didn't expect her to get here in time, but at least someone would know where I was when things went sideways. I climbed down from the cab and popped open my toolbox. Inside, I found a crowbar, a heavy-duty flashlight, and a roll of duct tape, because duct tape fixes everything, including, on one memorable occasion, a busted hydraulic line. I also grabbed the snub-nosed .38 revolver I kept in the locked compartment under the seat. I'm not a gun nut, but a woman running construction sites in rough neighborhoods learns to protect herself. The .38 felt cold and solid in my hand. I checked the cylinder, loaded, and tucked it into the back of my waistband. Then I started walking toward the warehouses. The night was quiet in that heavy, pressing way that makes every little sound echo. My boots crunched on gravel. A distant dog barked somewhere. The wind rattled a loose piece of sheet metal on one of the buildings, making a sound like a cheap ghost in a haunted house. As I got closer, I saw lights in the far warehouse. Not bright lights, just the dim, sickly yellow glow of work lamps bleeding through dirty windows. And parked outside, half hidden behind a rusted dumpster, was a black SUV with tinted windows. Richard's style, no question about it. The man had never driven anything that wasn't black, expensive, and menacing. I crept up to the side of the warehouse and pressed myself against the cold corrugated metal wall. There was a door about 20 feet down, propped slightly open with a brick. I slipped through it, crowbar in one hand, flashlight in the other. The inside of the warehouse was a maze of old pallets, rusted shelving units, and piles of God knows what covered in dusty tarps. The air smelled like mildew and diesel and something sharper, blood, maybe. My stomach tightened. Voices drifted from somewhere deeper inside. I followed them, weaving through the junk, stepping as quietly as my steel-toed boots would allow. The voices got clearer as I got closer. Told you to make it look like an accident. That voice was cold, clipped, dripping with old money arrogance. Richard Harrington. I'd know that voice anywhere. I'm not killing anyone. A younger voice, nervous, edgy. That wasn't part of the deal. You said we were just gonna scare him. Plans change. Now you listen to me. I rounded a stack of rotting pallets and finally got a visual. The scene was lit by a single work lamp on a stand, casting long, jagged shadows across the concrete floor. Jack was tied to a metal chair in the middle of the open space. His face was a mess, blood dripping from a split lip, one eye swollen half shut, bruising already darkening along his jaw. His white dress shirt was torn and stained. But his eyes, those blue eyes I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago, were wide open and defiant. Standing over him was Richard Harrington himself. 72 years old, silver hair perfectly combed, wearing a $3,000 suit in the middle of a filthy warehouse like he owned the place. Which, technically, he did. Next to him was a goon I didn't recognize, a thick-necked guy in a too-tight jacket who looked like he spent more time at the gym than at the library. And off to the side, hovering like a nervous mouse, was Greg. Jack's assistant. Richard's inside man. I should have known. You think the FBI is going to care about your evidence? Richard was saying, pacing back and forth in front of Jack. I own half the judges in this state. I own the mayor. I own people you don't even know exist. Whatever you think you have on me, it'll disappear before the ink dries on the report. Jack lifted his head, and even through the blood and swelling, he managed to smile. You're scared, Dad. I've never seen you scared before. It's a good look on you. Richard's hand lashed out and slapped Jack across the face. The sound echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. I flinched, my grip tightening on the crowbar. Every instinct screamed at me to charge in, but I held back. 2 against 1, 3 if you counted Greg, which I didn't, weren't great odds. I needed a plan. Where's the flash drive? Richard demanded. You were supposed to deliver it tonight. Where is it? Somewhere you'll never find it. Another slap. Harder this time. Jack's head snapped to the side. I'm going to ask one more time, Richard said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Then I'm going to let Victor here ask in his own way. And Victor is not nearly as patient as I am. The thick-necked goon cracked his knuckles. Subtlety was clearly not in his job description. I'd seen enough. I backed away from the scene, my mind racing. The flash drive was in my pocket. I had the evidence. What I didn't have was a way to get Jack out of that chair without getting us both killed. Then I looked down at the crowbar in my hand. Then I looked up at the ceiling, where a network of old pipes and conduits crisscrossed the warehouse. Then I looked at the skid steer, still parked 500 yards away. And I had an idea. A stupid, reckless, absolutely insane idea. The kind of idea that had defined my entire career in construction. I slipped back out of the warehouse the way I'd come and ran to the skid steer. The engine turned over on the first try, bless that Caterpillar reliability. I unhitched the trailer with the excavator, because I needed speed more than firepower. Then I pointed the skid steer at the warehouse and pushed the throttle all the way forward. 12 miles an hour doesn't sound like much, but when you're sitting in a 7,000-pound machine barreling toward a building, it feels like breaking the sound barrier. I aimed for the big roll-up door on the south side of the warehouse. The blade was raised high, like a knight's lance. I was about 100 yards out when someone inside must have heard the engine, because shouting started. Too late. The skid steer hit the roll-up door at full speed. The door didn't stand a chance. It crumpled like aluminum foil, tearing off its tracks and flying inward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. I drove straight through the chaos, dust and debris billowing around me, the work lamp flickering wildly as the whole building seemed to shudder. When the dust settled, I could see everyone. Richard had stumbled backward, his perfect suit now covered in grime. Victor the goon was fumbling for something inside his jacket, probably a gun. Greg had literally fallen over and was scrambling behind a pallet like a cockroach caught in the light. And Jack, still tied to his chair, was staring at me with an expression I can only describe as pure, undiluted awe. "Frankie," he breathed. "You came." "Of course I came, you idiot." I killed the engine and grabbed my crowbar. "Did you really think I was going to let you have all the fun?" Victor finally got his gun out. It was a big, black, ridiculous pistol that looked like something out of an action movie. He pointed it at me, his hand shaking slightly. "Stop right there. Don't move." I climbed down from the skid steer, crowbar resting on my shoulder. "Buddy, I just drove a loader through a wall. Do I look like the kind of person who responds well to stop?" "Shoot her," Richard shouted. "What are you waiting for?" Victor hesitated. And in that hesitation I saw my opening. This guy wasn't a killer. He was a hired hand who'd signed up to intimidate, not to murder. He didn't want to shoot a woman in cold blood. That made one of us. "Here's the thing, Victor," I said, walking toward him slowly, casually, like I was strolling through a park. "My name is Frankie O'Donnell. This morning, I bulldozed a $6 million mansion because I was mad at my husband. Now imagine what I'm going to do to the men who kidnapped him." I was about 10 feet away now. Victor's gun was still pointed at me, but his eyes were darting between me and Richard, uncertainty written all over his face. "I know you're just doing a job," I continued. "So here's my offer. You put the gun down and walk away, and I won't tell the FBI about your involvement. They're already on their way, by the way. Should be here any minute. You might hear the sirens if you listen real hard." That was a bluff. I had no idea when Agent Chen would arrive. But Victor didn't know that. "Don't listen to her," Richard snarled. "She's bluffing." I swung the crowbar off my shoulder and pointed it at Richard. "And you. You disgusting excuse for a human being. You got a 25-year-old girl pregnant just to frame your own son. You've been terrorizing your family for decades. You had your own wife committed to a mental institution when she tried to leave you. You think I don't know about that? Jack told me everything." Richard's face went white. "That's a lie." "Is it? Let's ask Jack." I turned to my husband, still tied to the chair. "Jack, did your father have your mother committed against her will?" Jack's voice was hoarse but steady. "Yes. She wasn't crazy. She just wanted a divorce. He had her declared incompetent and locked her up for 6 years. She died in that place." The warehouse went very quiet. Even Victor lowered his gun a few inches, looking at Richard with an expression that had shifted from uncertainty to disgust. "You son of a bitch," Victor muttered. "Don't you dare judge me," Richard spat. "You're no better. You took my money." "Yeah, well." Victor holstered his gun. "I'm giving it back. I didn't sign up for this." He turned and walked toward the gaping hole where the roll-up door used to be. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at me. The FBI. You weren't kidding about that? I wasn't kidding. He nodded once, then disappeared into the night. That left Richard. And Greg. Greg was still cowering behind the pallet, looking like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Richard, on the other hand, was trembling with rage. His silver hair had fallen out of its perfect part, his face was splotchy red, and his eyes were wild. You think you've won? He hissed. You think this changes anything? I'll have my lawyers tear you apart. Destruction of property, breaking and entering, assault. I haven't assaulted anyone yet, I said. But the night's still young. I walked past him to Jack and knelt down to cut the zip ties around his wrists with the utility knife I kept in my boot. The plastic snapped, and Jack's hands came free. He grabbed my arm immediately, his grip surprisingly strong for a man who'd just been beaten. Frankie, the flash drive. Safe. I patted my pocket. Right here. Good. He let out a ragged breath. That's really good. I helped him to his feet. He swayed a little, so I wrapped his arm around my shoulders and braced him against me. He smelled like blood and sweat and the faint ghost of the cologne he'd put on this morning, back when this was just a normal day. Frankie. His voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry. For everything. For making you hate me. I never hated you, Jack. I was furious, but I never hated you. I looked up at his bruised, swollen face and felt my heart crack right down the middle. You should have told me. We could have fought him together. I couldn't risk it. If he'd hurt you. Hurt me? I laughed, and it came out a little wet. Jack, I drive bulldozers for a living. I've been threatened by union bosses, corrupt inspectors, and a guy who tried to settle a contract dispute with a pipe wrench. Your father doesn't scare me. He should, Richard snarled from behind us. He should scare everyone. We turned to face him. Richard had pulled a small, silver pistol from inside his jacket. It was elegant and understated, just like him. And it was pointed directly at us. Give me the flash drive, he said. His voice was calmer now, which somehow made it worse. Give it to me, and I'll let you walk out of here. Refuse, and I'll shoot you both and claim self-defense. An intruder broke into my warehouse. A tragic misunderstanding. You'd shoot your own son? I asked. I stopped thinking of Jack as my son the day he married you. Richard's lip curled. You were always the problem, Frankie. I could have controlled Jack. He was weak, like his mother. But then you came along, with your blue-collar bravado and your I built this myself nonsense. You put ideas in his head. You made him think he could be independent. Gee, Richard. Tell me how you really feel. Give me the drive. I looked at Jack. He looked at me. And in that glance, we communicated the way only two people who've been married for 8 years can. A whole conversation passed between us in a fraction of a second. He raised one eyebrow slightly. I tilted my head a fraction of an inch. He blinked twice, slowly. I curled the corner of my mouth. It meant, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And, absolutely. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the flash drive. It was a small, ordinary piece of black plastic, utterly unremarkable to look at. But right then, it felt like the most important object in the world. Here, I said, holding it up. You want it? Come and get it. I threw it. Not to Richard, across the warehouse, toward the far wall, where it clattered against a pile of scrap metal and disappeared into the shadows. Richard's eyes instinctively followed the arc of the flash drive. It was a split-second distraction, but a split second was all I needed. I lunged forward, swinging the crowbar in a wide arc. It connected with the silver pistol, sending it spinning out of Richard's hand and clattering across the concrete floor. Richard howled in pain, clutching his wrist. You bitch. I've been called worse. I picked up the pistol and pointed it at him. Usually by people I'd just beaten at contract negotiations. In the distance, finally, the sound of sirens. Real ones this time, getting closer. Richard stood there, cradling his injured hand, his perfect suit ruined, his perfect hair disheveled, his perfect plan in shambles. He looked old suddenly. Old and small and defeated. "You've destroyed everything," he said, his voice hollow. "Everything I built." "No," Jack said, stepping forward. His arm was still around my shoulders, but his voice was stronger now. "You destroyed it yourself. We're just the cleanup crew." The warehouse filled with red and blue flashing lights as FBI vehicles screeched into the loading yard. Agent Chen was the first one through the hole in the wall, her service weapon drawn, her expression all business. She took in the scene, Richard clutching his wrist, Jack bleeding and bruised, me holding a pistol and a crowbar, and shook her head. "Mrs. O'Donnell," she said, holstering her weapon. "When I said stay put, I'm pretty sure this wasn't what I meant." "You're welcome," I said. She almost smiled. "Almost. Where's the evidence?" I pointed toward the pile of scrap metal with the crowbar. "Over there somewhere. You might need a flashlight." Agent Chen dispatched 2 agents to search the debris and another to cuff Richard Harrington. As they led him away, he paused next to me. His eyes, so similar to Jack's in color but utterly different in soul, met mine. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "People like you don't win against people like me." "Richard," I said, "I just won. And I did it with a crowbar and a skid steer. Imagine what I could do with a law degree." They took him away. Greg was fished out from behind his pallet and escorted out in cuffs, blubbering something about how he was just following orders. Victor, I learned later, turned himself involuntarily and cooperated fully with the investigation. Turns out even hired muscle has a line he won't cross. Agent Chen found the flash drive and held it up like a trophy. "We'll take it from here. Your husband needs medical attention." "I'm fine," Jack said, then promptly collapsed against me. "Sure you are, tough guy." I adjusted my grip on him and started half carrying him toward the ambulance that had just pulled up. "We're going to get you patched up, and then we're going to have a very long conversation about honesty and communication and why I'm protecting you by pretending to cheat is never, ever an acceptable strategy." "That's fair," he mumbled. "Frankie?" "Yeah? You drove a bulldozer through a house for me." "I drove a bulldozer through a house at you, not for you." Important distinction. Same thing. He smiled, even though it must have hurt like hell with that split lip. "You love me. I demolished $6 million worth of real estate over you. What do you think? I think I'm the luckiest man in the world." "You're an idiot is what you are." But I kissed him anyway, very gently, on the uninjured corner of his mouth. "Come on. Let's get you to the hospital." The paramedics took over, loading Jack onto a gurney and fussing over his injuries. I stood in the wreckage of the warehouse, watching the FBI agents swarming around, collecting evidence, taking photos. The flash drive was in an evidence bag. Richard Harrington was in handcuffs. And my husband, the man I'd woken up that morning planning to divorce, was looking at me from the back of an ambulance with an expression that could only be described as completely, utterly smitten. I walked over to the ambulance and climbed in next to him. The paramedic gave me a look but didn't argue. "Smart woman." "So," Jack said, reaching for my hand. "What happens now?" "Now?" I laced my fingers through his. "Now we rebuild. The house I can't get back," he said. "The $6 million one you turned into gravel. The house was ugly anyway. Too many arches." "I liked the arches." "You have terrible taste. That's why you married me." "I'm the one with taste." He laughed, then winced. "Don't make me laugh. It hurts." "Then stop being funny." We rode to the hospital in comfortable silence, his hand in mine. The sirens weren't on, no rush, his injuries were mostly superficial. Cuts, bruises, maybe a cracked rib. He'd heal. We both would. At the hospital, they stitched up his lip, bandaged his ribs, and told him he'd be sore for a few weeks. I sat in the chair next to his bed, refusing to leave even when the nurses gave me pointed looks about visiting hours. The adrenaline had worn off, and I was crashing hard, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Richard pointing that silver pistol at us. Around 3 in the morning, Jack stirred. "Frankie? You still here?" "Where else would I be?" "I don't know. Bulldozing another building?" "Don't tempt me. There's a strip mall on Route 9 that's been asking for it." He smiled, then turned serious. "I meant what I said. About being sorry. I should have trusted you." "Yeah, you should have." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the edge of his bed. "But I get it. Your father spent your whole life making you feel powerless. It's hard to break out of that. I just wish you'd realized sooner that you weren't alone anymore. You had me. I know that now." He took my hand again. "Are we going to be okay?" I thought about it. About the 8 years we'd had, the good parts and the hard parts. About the bulldozer and the mansion and the warehouse. About the way he'd looked at me when I drove through that wall. "Yeah," I said. "We're going to be okay. But we're going to do things differently from now on. No more secrets. No more protecting each other by lying. We're a team, Jack. Teams don't keep score, and they sure as hell don't keep secrets." "Agreed." He squeezed my hand. "Frankie, there's something I need to tell you." My heart stuttered. "If you're about to confess to another fake affair, I swear to God." "No, nothing like that." He took a deep breath. "The evidence on that flash drive, it's not just about my father's business dealings. There's more." "More?" "My father has been working with some very dangerous people. Developers, politicians, even a few names that might interest the FBI's Organized Crime Division. I've been gathering information for 3 years, Frankie. 3 years. And now it's all in Agent Chen's hands." I let out a low whistle. "So this is bigger than just Richard." "Much bigger. It could bring down half the city council. Maybe some state officials too." I wanted to tell you, but I was terrified. The more you knew, the more danger you were in. I appreciate the concern, but I think I've proven I can handle danger. You've proven you can handle anything. He lifted my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles. "I'm not going to underestimate you again. I promise." "Good. Now get some sleep. We've got a long road ahead." He closed his eyes, and within minutes, his breathing evened out. I sat there in the dim hospital room, listening to the beep of the monitors and the distant hum of the ventilation system. Outside the window, the sky was just starting to lighten on the horizon. Dawn was coming. I thought about Amber. She'd risked everything to tell me the truth. I made a mental note to call her later, to thank her properly and make sure she had what she needed. Whatever else happened, she and that baby deserved a fresh start. I thought about my mother, probably still awake and pacing her kitchen floor, waiting for news. I sent her a quick text, "Jack's safe. Richard's in custody. I'm fine. Call you tomorrow." She replied with a string of heart emojis that would have embarrassed her if she knew I'd ever show anyone. And I thought about Richard Harrington, sitting in a federal detention cell, probably already on the phone with his army of lawyers. Let him try. The flash drive had 3 years of meticulous documentation. His days of wielding power like a weapon were over. My phone buzzed with a message from Agent Chen, "Flash drive contents confirmed. Multiple arrest warrants being issued. You and Jack will need to give formal statements, but for now, rest. You've earned it." I typed back, "Keep me posted." "And Agent Chen?" "Thank you." She replied with a thumbs-up emoji. I guess even FBI agents have their limits for formality at 4 in the morning. I leaned back in the hospital chair and closed my eyes. Tomorrow there would be paperwork and statements and probably a media circus. The story of the woman who bulldozed a mansion and then rescued her husband with construction equipment was already going viral. My phone had about 300 notifications from news outlets wanting interviews. Lucy, my assistant, had sent a message saying she was handling it, and I should take all the time I needed. I made a mental note to give her a massive raise. But all of that could wait. Right now, in this quiet room, the only thing that mattered was the steady rise and fall of Jack's chest, the warmth of his hand in mine, and the knowledge that after 8 years of marriage, we were finally, truly, starting over. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the window and a nurse was gently shaking my shoulder. "Mrs. O'Donnell? Your husband is asking for you." I blinked awake. Jack was sitting up in bed, looking considerably better than he had a few hours ago. The swelling around his eye had gone down, and someone had brought him a cup of what looked like truly terrible hospital coffee. "Morning," he said. "Morning." I stretched, my neck protesting the night in the chair. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a truck. But I hear the woman who rescued me is kind of a badass, so it was worth it." "She's okay," I said. "A little impulsive. Has a thing for heavy machinery. My type exactly." He set down his coffee. "So I've been thinking. That's dangerous." "Haha. I've been thinking about what you said. About us being a team. And I realized I've been a pretty lousy teammate. I wasn't exactly spouse of the year either. I bulldozed your house." "Our house," he corrected. "Technically, we're still married. Community property and all that. Are you going to sue me for damages?" "I'm thinking about it." "What can you offer in settlement?" I pretended to consider. "How about one slightly used bulldozer and a lifetime supply of home-cooked meals? Throw in the promise that you'll never drive heavy machinery through another one of our properties, and you've got a deal." "I make no such promises." "You might deserve it again someday." He laughed, then clutched his ribs. "Stop. Seriously. The laughing hurts." The nurse came in to check his vitals, and I stepped out to get some real coffee from the cafeteria. While I was waiting in line, my phone rang. It was Big Mike. "Frankie. Holy crap, I just saw the news. You drove the skid steer through a wall?" "Morning to you too, Mike. Were you going for some kind of record? Most buildings demolished in a single day? Just lucky, I guess." I grabbed my coffee and found a quiet corner. "Listen, Mike, I need you to do me a favor. The D11 is still at Sterling Hills. Can you get a crew out there to retrieve it? And maybe send someone to the warehouse district on the west side to pick up the skid steer and the excavator? The FBI might still be crawling around, so tell the guys to bring ID. Consider it done." "Anything else?" "Yeah. Put Lucy in charge of operations for the next few days. I'm going to be tied up with legal stuff, and I want someone I trust running things." "You got it, boss." He paused. "Hey, Frankie? I'm glad you're okay. And I'm glad Jack's okay. Whatever was going on with him, I never believed he'd cheat on you. That man looks at you like you hung the moon." "Yeah," I said softly. "I'm starting to realize that." I hung up and headed back to Jack's room. When I got there, I found him arguing with a doctor about being discharged. "I'm fine," Jack was saying. "A few bruises. I can recover at home. Mr. Harrington, you have 2 cracked ribs and a mild concussion. We'd like to keep you for observation at least another night." "Doctor," I interrupted, "give us 5 minutes. I'll talk some sense into him." The doctor looked relieved and made a quick exit. I sat on the edge of Jack's bed. "You're staying," I said. "Frankie. You're staying, and I'm going to go home, take a shower, and pack a bag. Then I'm coming back here, and we're going to talk about what happens next. Really talk. No secrets, no lies, no protecting each other. Deal?" He looked at me for a long moment. Deal. I leaned over and kissed him, careful to avoid his split lip. I love you, you know. Even when you're being an idiot. I love you too. Even when you're committing felonies with construction equipment. Alleged felonies. I prefer to think of it as aggressive property revaluation. I left him chuckling in his hospital bed and walked out into the bright morning sunlight. The hospital parking lot was already filling up with visitors and staff. A news van was parked across the street. They'd found us. I pulled my cap low and ducked into my truck before anyone could spot me. The drive home was strange. The streets were the same as they'd always been, the same strip malls, the same gas stations, the same potholes on Elm Street that the city had been promising to fix for 3 years. But everything felt different. Lighter. Like a storm had passed through and cleared out all the stale air. When I pulled into our driveway, I sat in the truck for a minute, looking at our house. It wasn't a mansion. It was a modest ranch-style place with a sagging porch and a garden that I kept meaning to weed. The paint was peeling on the south side, and the roof would need replacing in a few years. But it was ours. We'd bought it together, fixed it up together, made it a home together. I walked inside and was greeted by the familiar smell of old wood and the faint scent of Jack's cologne still lingering in the air. The kitchen island still had the iPad on it, the one that had started this whole mess. I picked it up, then set it down again. Later. I'd deal with it later. I took the longest shower of my life, letting the hot water wash away the dust and sweat and dried blood. I'd picked up a few scrapes and bruises myself, the adrenaline had masked them, but now they were making themselves known. A nasty purple bruise on my hip where I'd banged into something. A cut on my forearm I didn't remember getting. I changed into clean clothes, packed a bag, and was about to head back to the hospital when my phone rang. It was Agent Chen. Mrs. O'Donnell, I wanted to update you personally. Richard Harrington has been formally charged with kidnapping, assault, conspiracy, and about 24 counts of financial fraud. He's being held without bail. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. What about the others? The stuff on the flash drive? Multiple arrests are happening as we speak. I can't give you details yet, but I can tell you this, your husband's evidence is going to have a major impact. He's a hero, Mrs. O'Donnell. Even if he doesn't feel like one. He's going to be insufferable when I tell him that. She laughed, a surprisingly warm sound from a federal agent. I'll let you deliver the news. We'll need formal statements from both of you, but that can wait a few days. Get some rest. Both of you. I will. Thank you, Agent Chen. For everything. Just doing my job. And Mrs. O'Donnell? Between you and me, that thing with the bulldozer was legendary. My husband saw it on the news and said, that woman is terrifying. I told him, that woman is my new hero. I grinned. Tell your husband I'm available for home renovations anytime. I hung up, grabbed my bag, and headed back to the hospital. On the way, I stopped at the diner where I'd met Amber the day before. I wasn't sure why, maybe just to prove to myself that everything that happened there was real. The same waitress was behind the counter. She looked up when I walked in and her eyes went wide. You're the bulldozer lady. Guilty as charged. Can I get 2 coffees and a slice of that apple pie to go? Coming right up. She bustled around, then leaned in conspiratorially. Is it true what they're saying? That your husband's father set the whole thing up? It's true. She shook her head. Some people. You know, my ex-husband cheated on me with my cousin. I didn't bulldoze his house, but I did key his car pretty good. That's also a valid response. Didn't feel as satisfying as a bulldozer, I bet. Probably not. I paid for my coffee and pie and headed out. Back at the hospital, I found Jack sitting up in bed, watching the news. His own face stared back at him from the screen, an old photo from some business magazine profile. The headline read, Local businessman kidnapped by father in shocking conspiracy. Turn that off, I said, setting down the coffee. You need to rest, not watch your own drama. I can't believe how fast the media got hold of this. Are you kidding? A bulldozer, a kidnapping, a corrupt real estate mogul, and a secret baby? This is catnip for cable news. We're probably going to get a Netflix documentary offer by the end of the week. God, I hope not. He accepted the coffee gratefully. Did Agent Chin call you? Yeah. Your father's been charged. Multiple arrests are happening. She called you a hero. Jack stared into his coffee cup. I don't feel like a hero. I feel like a guy who let his wife think he was a cheating bastard for months. We've been over this. You made a bad call. You were trying to protect me. It was stupid, but it came from a good place. I sat down next to him. And if we're being honest, I made some bad calls too. I could have talked to you before I fired up the D11. But I was so angry, so hurt, that I just acted. You had every right to be angry. I made sure of that. Yeah, well. Next time you want to make me angry, maybe just forget to take out the trash like a normal husband. Deal. He was quiet for a moment. Frankie, what happens to Amber? I'd been wondering that myself. I don't know. She's a victim in all this too. Richard manipulated her, got her pregnant, used her as a pawn. She's going to need support, not judgment. I was thinking, Jack said carefully. She's carrying my half-sibling. That baby is going to be born into a mess. Maybe we could help? Not financially, necessarily, but just be there for her? Yeah. I thought about Amber, sitting across from me in the diner, her hands shaking around that cup of herbal tea. She'd risked Richard's wrath to tell me the truth. She'd helped save Jack's life. I think that's a good idea, I said. A really good idea. But let's take it one step at a time. First, you get out of this hospital. Then we deal with the legal stuff. Then we figure out the rest. Jack nodded and leaned back against his pillows. One step at a time. I can do that. The next few days were a blur of hospital visits, legal consultations, and media dodging. Jack was discharged on day 3, still sore but healing. We gave our statements to the FBI, answered approximately 1 million questions, and signed enough paperwork to deforest a small country. Lucy handled the company like a pro. Big Mike retrieved all our equipment without incident. My mother showed up at our house with enough casserole to feed an army and immediately started fussing over Jack like he was her own son. I always knew that father of his was rotten, she declared, setting a Tupperware of lasagna on our counter. The way he looked at people. Like he was calculating their price tag. You never said anything, I pointed out. I didn't want to be rude. But I knew. A mother knows these things. Jack, to his credit, accepted my mother's fussing with grace. He even ate 2 helpings of her lasagna and complimented her on the seasoning. That's when I knew he was really committed to making things right. Amber called on day 4. She'd been interviewed by the FBI and had given a full statement about Richard's manipulation. They weren't pressing charges against her, she was clearly a victim. She was staying with a friend in another town, laying low, trying to figure out what came next. Mrs. O'Donnell, she said, her voice still shaky, I just wanted to say thank you. For believing me. For not blaming me. I'm not going to pretend I understand everything you went through, I said. But I know what it's like to be underestimated. To be used. If you need anything, a job, a reference, someone to vouch for you, you call me. She started crying, and I pretended not to notice. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. I hung up feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Complicated, messy, imperfect peace. A week after the warehouse, Jack and I sat on our sagging porch, watching the sunset. He was still moving gingerly, favoring his ribs, but the bruises were fading and the light was back in his eyes. I was thinking, he said, about what you said at the hospital. About us being a team. I said a lot of things at the hospital. You'll have to be more specific. About no more secrets. No more protecting each other by lying. I want to do that. Really do it. But I think it's going to be harder than it sounds. I've been keeping secrets from my father my whole life. It's kind of my default setting. I know. And I've been handling everything myself since I was a teenager. Letting someone else in, really in, that's going to take practice. I reached over and took his hand. So let's practice. Every day. We'll screw up, and we'll forgive each other, and we'll try again. That sounds like a marriage. That's because it is, genius. We've been married for 8 years. We just forgot how to do it right. He lifted my hand and kissed it. Thank you for bulldozing my house. You're welcome. But I'm not doing it again. Next time, I'm using dynamite. He laughed, then winced. Still hurts. I know. That's why I keep making jokes. We sat there as the sky turned orange and pink and finally a deep, velvety blue. The stars came out, one by one, and the crickets started their nightly chorus. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor was barbecuing, and the smell of grilled meat drifted on the breeze. It was a perfectly ordinary evening. And after everything we'd been through, ordinary felt like a miracle. So, Jack said finally. What now? Now? We rebuild. We've got a company to run, a marriage to fix, and apparently a half-sibling in-law on the way. We're going to be busy. Think we can handle it? I leaned over and kissed him, slow and sweet. Jack, I drove a bulldozer through a mansion, a skid steer through a warehouse wall, and faced down your father with a crowbar. I think we can handle anything. He smiled, and for the first time in a long time, it reached his eyes. I love you, Frankie O'Donnell. I love you too, Jack Harrington. Even when you're an idiot. Even when you make me so mad I want to demolish things. Even then. Especially then? I laughed. Yeah. Especially then. The evening settled around us like a warm blanket. Tomorrow there would be challenges and problems and probably more media attention than either of us wanted. There would be legal proceedings and business decisions and difficult conversations. But tonight, on this sagging porch, under these stars, we had something we hadn't had in years. We had a fresh start. And I was going to make damn sure we didn't waste it. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings, media frenzy, and slow, careful healing. Jack's ribs mended. The bruises faded from purple to yellow to nothing. And Richard Harrington, after a spectacularly failed attempt to have his case dismissed, was denied bail and left to sit in a federal detention center while his army of lawyers scrambled for a strategy that didn't exist. The trial was set for 6 months out, but in the end, it never happened. When the full scope of the evidence hit, 3 years of meticulously documented fraud, bribery, money laundering, and conspiracy, Richard's legal team crumbled. They took a plea deal. 25 years, no parole. The great Richard Harrington, titan of real estate, would be an old man by the time he saw freedom again. If he lived that long. I was in the courtroom when he entered his plea. He looked small in his orange jumpsuit, his silver hair dull and unwashed. When they led him away, he passed within 5 feet of where Jack and I were sitting. He didn't look at us. I don't think he could. Jack squeezed my hand. It's over. Yeah, I said. It really is. Outside the courthouse, the media was waiting. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. I'd gotten used to it by then. The story of the bulldozer bride had gone national, sparking 1,000 think pieces about women, rage, and property destruction. Some people called me a folk hero. Others called me a menace. I figured the truth was somewhere in between. I pushed through the crowd with Jack at my side, ignoring the microphones shoved in our faces. Lucy had sent a car, and we climbed in and let the tinted windows swallow us up. "Where to?" the driver asked. I looked at Jack. He looked at me. "Home," I said. Home, by then, had become something new. After the dust settled, Jack and I sat down and had the conversation we should have had 8 years ago. The one about what we actually wanted. Not what his father wanted. Not what society expected. What we wanted. Turns out, what we wanted was surprisingly simple. We sold the ranch house. Too many ghosts. Instead, we bought a piece of land about 10 miles outside town, 20 acres of rolling meadow with a creek running through it and an old barn that was one good windstorm away from collapsing. I saw it and immediately started planning the renovation in my head. Jack saw me planning and just smiled. "You're going to want to drive heavy machinery on it, aren't you?" "Obviously." "Then buy it." So I did. With my own money, from my own company, in my own name. Some habits, I figured, were worth keeping. The barn renovation became my obsession. I drew up the plans myself, hired a crew from O'Donnell Construction, and spent every spare moment on site in my steel-toed boots and hard hat. There was something deeply satisfying about building something with my own hands, watching something new rise from the ground. It felt like the opposite of demolition. It felt like hope. Jack, meanwhile, had become a minor celebrity. The hero husband narrative had taken hold in the media, and he'd been asked to speak at conferences about corporate ethics and whistleblowing. He always said yes, but he always kept it short. He wasn't interested in fame. He was interested in making sure what happened to him didn't happen to anyone else. One evening, about 4 months after the trial, I was standing on the half-finished porch of the new house, watching the sunset paint the meadow gold. Jack came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "I got a call today," he said. "Oh yeah? Who from?" "Amber. She had the baby. A boy. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. She named him Leo." I turned in his arms to face him. "Leo. That's a good name. How is she?" "Tired. Overwhelmed. But happy, I think. She said to tell you thank you." Again. Amber and I had stayed in touch. After everything, I'd made good on my promise to help her. I'd connected her with a friend of mine who ran a nonprofit for single mothers, and she'd gotten a job and a small apartment in a town a few hours away. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was a start. A real one. "We should go visit," I said. "When things settle down." "I'd like that." Jack rested his chin on my shoulder. "You know, for the longest time I thought family was something you were born into. Something you couldn't escape. But I'm starting to think maybe it's something you choose." That's very philosophical for a guy who used to think a balanced breakfast was coffee and ambition. He laughed. "You're never going to let me live that down, are you?" "Never." The new house was finished by late summer. It wasn't a mansion, I'd had enough of mansions to last a lifetime. It was a 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch, big windows, and a kitchen that I'd designed myself with enough counter space to roll out pasta dough and enough outlets to run every appliance known to man. The barn had been converted into a workshop where I could tinker with equipment and Jack could pretend he knew how to use a table saw. On the day we moved in, Big Mike showed up with a bottle of whiskey and a card signed by the entire O'Donnell construction crew. Lucy brought a potted plant that she'd somehow kept alive for the entire drive out. My mother brought 3 casseroles, because in her world, no life event was complete without a casserole. We sat on the new porch, watching the fireflies blink in the meadow, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Contentment. Deep, quiet, bone-deep contentment. "So," Mike said, pouring himself a generous glass of whiskey, "you gonna bulldoze this one too, or is it a keeper?" "This one's a keeper," I said. "Good. Because I'm getting too old to haul heavy equipment across town on a moment's notice." "You're 42, Mike." "Like I said. Too old." We stayed on the porch until the stars came out, talking and laughing and occasionally falling into comfortable silence. My mother fell asleep in the rocking chair, a half-finished glass of wine dangling from her fingers. Lucy and Mike got into a heated debate about the best way to pour a concrete foundation. Jack leaned over and kissed my temple. "Happy?" he asked. "Disgustingly so." "Good. Me too." The months rolled on. Jack's speaking engagements tapered off, and he started working as a consultant for small businesses, helping them set up ethical practices and avoid the kind of corruption his father had perfected. He wasn't making the kind of money he used to, but he was happier. I could see it in the way he carried himself, lighter, looser, like he'd finally put down a weight he'd been carrying his whole life. My company continued to grow. We landed a big contract to build a community center in a neighborhood that had been neglected for decades. It was exactly the kind of project I'd always wanted, meaningful work that actually helped people. I threw myself into it with my usual intensity, but I also learned to delegate. To trust my team. To go home at a reasonable hour and actually be present when I got there. On the one-year anniversary of what the media had dubbed the Demolition Day, Jack woke me up at sunrise with a cup of coffee and a suspiciously wrapped box. "What's this?" I asked, sitting up in bed. "Open it." I tore off the paper. Inside was a small, beautifully crafted model bulldozer, made of polished steel and mounted on a wooden base. A plaque on the front read, "For Frankie. For when words aren't enough. I love you. Jack." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I started laughing so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. "You got me a tiny bulldozer? It's a collectible. Very expensive. It's the most romantic thing anyone's ever given me." "I was hoping you'd say that. Because I also got you something else." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a deed. To an abandoned strip mall on Route 9. I looked up at him, my eyes wide. "The strip mall on Route 9? The one you said was asking for it." "Jack. Are you serious?" "Completely serious. It's an eyesore. The community's been trying to get it torn down for years. I bought it for $1 at a tax auction." He grinned, that boyish grin I'd fallen in love with a lifetime ago. "I thought you might want to do the honors." I kissed him. Hard. "You are absolutely insane, and I love you." "So you'll do it?" "I'll do it tomorrow." And I did. The next morning, I fired up the D11, the same D11 that had taken down the Sterling Hills mansion, and drove it to Route 9. A crowd had gathered. Somehow, word had gotten out. There were news vans, spectators, even a guy selling t-shirts that said "I survived the bulldozer bride." Jack stood at the edge of the lot, wearing a hard hat I'd insisted he put on, watching me with a mixture of pride and amusement. "You ready?" I shouted over the engine. "Born ready." I pushed the throttle forward. The strip mall didn't stand a chance. It was a crumbling, rat-infested wreck, and when the blade hit the first wall, the whole thing seemed to sigh in relief. Concrete crumbled. Glass shattered. Rusted metal beams groaned and twisted. I worked methodically, taking it down section by section, while the crowd cheered and the news cameras rolled. When it was done, I climbed down from the cab to thunderous applause. A little girl ran up to me with a plastic hard hat and asked for my autograph. I signed it, Frankie O'Donnell. Dream big. Break things when necessary. The city council, who had been trying to condemn that building for years, officially thanked me. The local newspaper ran a front-page story with the headline, "Local Entrepreneur Cleans Up Neighborhood, Again." My mother framed it and hung it in her living room. That night, Jack and I sat on our porch, watching the stars come out over the meadow. The air smelled like freshly cut grass and the faint, sweet scent of the honeysuckle that grew along the fence line. "You know," Jack said, "most couples celebrate their anniversary with dinner and a movie. Most couples are boring." Fair point. I leaned my head against his shoulder. "Are you ever going to get tired of me driving heavy machinery through things?" "Never. In fact, I've been thinking. There's an old warehouse on the south side that's been condemned for years. I could probably get it for another $1. Jack Harrington, are you trying to enable my demolition habit? I'm trying to support my wife's hobbies. There's a difference. I laughed and kissed his cheek. I love you. You know that? I know. I love you too. We sat in silence for a while, watching the fireflies blink in the dark. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. The creek babbled softly. The world felt peaceful. Whole. Right. I was thinking about your father, I said eventually. Jack tensed slightly. What about him? Not in a bad way. I was just thinking about how close we came to letting him win. If I hadn't seen those messages on the iPad. If Amber hadn't come to the diner. If you hadn't left me that envelope in your desk drawer. If any one of those things hadn't happened, we might not be here right now. But they did happen, Jack said. And we are here. I know. I guess what I'm trying to say is, thank you. For not giving up. For gathering all that evidence, even when it was dangerous. For loving me enough to let me hate you. Jack was quiet for a moment. I almost didn't. There were so many times I wanted to tell you the truth. Especially at night, when you were sleeping, and I'd lie there next to you and think about how much I was hurting you. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than facing down your father? Much harder. My father was a monster. You were the love of my life. Hurting a monster is easy. Hurting you almost destroyed me. I reached over and took his hand. Our fingers laced together, familiar and warm. Well, stop it. No more hurting. From now on, the only thing you're allowed to destroy is condemned buildings. And only with your supervision. Obviously. I'm the expert. He laughed, that full, warm laugh that I'd heard so rarely in the early years of our marriage but now got to hear every day. I love you, Frankie O'Donnell. You and your bulldozers and your bad decisions and your absolutely terrifying way of handling problems. I love you too, Jack Harrington. You and your secrets and your sacrifices and your stupid, noble, self-destructive hero complex. So we're both a mess. A complete mess. But at least we're a mess together. He kissed me then, slow and sweet, and when we pulled apart, the stars seemed a little brighter, the night a little warmer, the future a little more full of possibility. 2 years later, we celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary with a party at the farmhouse. Everyone came, Big Mike, Lucy, my mother, even Agent Chen, who had become a family friend over the course of the investigation and trial. Amber drove in with Leo, who was now a chubby, giggling toddler with Jack's blue eyes and a shock of blonde hair. I held Leo on my hip while Jack grilled burgers on the new deck he'd built himself. It was a little crooked, but he was proud of it, and so was I. You know, Amber said, watching us, I never thanked you properly. For everything. You don't have to thank me, I said. You're family now. That's what family does. She smiled, her eyes glistening. I never really had a family before. Not a real one. Well, you do now. For better or worse. I think it's for better. I looked around the yard, at my mother arguing with Big Mike about the proper way to grill corn, at Lucy showing Agent Chen photos of her new puppy, at Jack flipping burgers with a spatula in one hand and a beer in the other. At this chaotic, imperfect, beautiful life we'd built together. Yeah, I said. It's definitely for better. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the last of the dishes were washed, Jack and I sat on the porch in our usual spots. The rocking chair for me, the old wooden bench for him. We'd sat here hundreds of times by now, through sunsets and rainstorms and one memorable tornado warning when we probably should have gone to the basement but couldn't bring ourselves to leave the view. 10 years, Jack said. Can you believe it? Some days I can't believe we made it past year 8. Year 8 was rough. Year 8 was a disaster. I rocked gently, the chair creaking in its familiar rhythm. But I'd do it all again. The iPad, the bulldozer, the warehouse, the hospital. All of it. Really? Really. Because it got us here. To this porch. To this life. To us, the way we are now. Honest. Real. No more pretending. Jack reached over and took my hand. I was thinking about what you said the night you rescued me. About us being a team. I think I finally understand what that means. Enlighten me. It means I don't have to carry everything by myself. It means I can lean on you, and you can lean on me, and neither of us has to be the strong one all the time. It means we're stronger together than we ever were apart. I looked at him, this man I'd married, this man I'd almost lost, this man who had loved me in silence for years because he thought it was the only way to keep me safe. And I felt a surge of something so powerful it almost knocked the breath out of me. Not just love. Gratitude. Pride. Hope. You've gotten very wise in your old age, I said. I had a good teacher. Who, me? I'm a terrible teacher. I solve problems with heavy machinery. That's exactly what I learned. Sometimes, the direct approach is the best approach. He stood up and pulled me to my feet. Come on. I want to show you something. He led me out to the barn, the one we'd renovated into a workshop. Inside, under a tarp in the corner, was something large and boxy. He pulled off the tarp with a flourish. It was a mini bulldozer. A real one, not a model. Small enough to fit in the barn, big enough to actually move some dirt. It was painted bright yellow, with Frankie's Fury stenciled on the side in bold black letters. I stared at it. Then I stared at Jack. Then I stared at it again. You bought me a bulldozer. A mini one. For the property. I figured if you're going to keep rearranging the landscape, you should have the right tool for the job. Jack Harrington. I walked around the machine, running my hand along its cool metal side. This is the most romantic thing anyone has ever done for me. And I'm including the time you faked an affair to save my life. High praise. You're insane. I'm your kind of insane. I climbed up into the seat and gripped the controls. The engine turned over with a satisfying roar. Get in. There's only one seat. Then sit on my lap. We'll figure it out. He laughed, shaking his head. Frankie, it's almost midnight. The neighbors are going to call the cops. Let them. I'll bulldoze the police station. You would, too. Try me. In the end, we didn't bulldoze anything that night. We sat in the barn, on the seat of that mini bulldozer, and talked until the sky started to lighten in the east. About the past. About the future. About all the things we still wanted to do, all the places we still wanted to go, all the ways we still wanted to grow. And when the sun finally rose, painting the meadow in shades of pink and gold, Jack kissed me and said, "Happy anniversary, Frankie." Happy anniversary, Jack. Here's to the next 10 years. I looked out at the meadow, at the house we'd built, at the life we'd fought for. And I smiled. The next 10? I'm planning on at least 50. You're stuck with me, Harrington. Wouldn't have it any other way, O'Donnell. I started the mini bulldozer and drove it out of the barn, into the bright morning light, with Jack perched on the armrest beside me. It was ridiculous. It was impractical. It was absolutely, perfectly us. And somewhere in the distance, on a stretch of highway that ran past our property, a truck driver honked his horn as he passed the farmhouse with the wraparound porch and the bright yellow bulldozer parked out front. He'd seen the news stories. He knew who lived there. He smiled and shook his head and said to no one in particular, "That woman is terrifying." Then he thought about it for a second and added, "Lucky husband." He had no idea how right he was.